everyone, this is Ian Schaefer here with UDA Technologies, and we are just about ready to dive into today's webinar covering 5 reasons to move your financial management to Construction Online. Of course, today as we're going through our webinar, we're going to be focused almost exclusively on Construction Online and how it's going to be interfacing with a number of different platforms, and hopefully we'll provide you a couple of key elements that will help you and your team migrate away from systems like Excel or pencil and paper into an online platform that gives you way more benefits to being able to track this information and push it through. Of course, here to help me today is Holly Gibson, another of our senior product specialists.
Hi, everyone.
And we also have Sydney Dorsey fielding questions for us today as well. So if you guys do have questions as we're going through the webinar today, don't forget you can find all of those question entry areas over on the GoToWebinar panel. If you go take a look, you'll see an area marked questions. Just click into it, you'll be able to type in your questions, and Sydney will be able to provide answers for those or sometimes flag them for us as we're walking through the webinar as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So again, as we're looking today, we're looking at the major reasons to move to Construction Online for your financial management, and we're going to be talking about moving away from systems like Excel or some of the old management systems. We're also going to provide a couple of highlights on how to save just tons and tons of time by not doing double entry anymore. Now, to begin with, we want to talk about some of the industry-leading estimating tools that we have available within Construction Online to give you guys an idea of where we're starting from today. So here, of course, to lead us off, Holly, why don't you go ahead and dive into some of these great features that we have in Construction Online estimating, especially since we're looking at some of your projects right now, and you probably have some great estimates available for us to glance at to begin with.
Absolutely, I do. So we'll go ahead and dive into one of my projects and one of my estimates here. And one thing that we hear a lot, I get the pleasure of working with a ton of people as they're getting started with Construction Online. And one thing that I hear really commonly, and I've been with UDA almost 8 years at this point, and I've had a chance just to work with with thousands of you guys over the years. But one of the things that I hear pretty frequently when people are getting started with our platform is that they're often transitioning away from a system like Excel. That seems to be a pretty common entry point for someone starting up a new company. Maybe they're not aware of software options available to them, and so it's not uncommon for people to kind of start off looking at a system like Excel or maybe even pen and paper to start managing those day-to-day finances or especially putting estimates and quotes and proposals together. What we often find, though, is that approach really comes with a set of challenges that becomes a real hindrance, especially when the company becomes more established, starts growing to establish more, kind of manage more than just the first couple of projects, but really managing multiple projects and seeing that company grow and bringing more people and more clients on board, really gaining some experience, kind of upping your game as far as the projects that you're working on. And what often happens is you'll bump into those limitations of Excel in terms of what it's able to give you from a big picture financial tracking standpoint. And there's also some pitfalls to using an Excel-based system. So one of the things that Construction Online offers, Ian, as you mentioned, is really a world-class estimating tool. That's going to be available under your Financials tab here. And you'll notice that I do already have an estimate in place. Now, what I've done is created my estimate from a template. So that's definitely one of the advantages that you're going to have in terms of what you're able to do with a system like Construction Online. But I'd like to get started just by talking about some of the pitfalls that you may run into with other systems regarding especially things like accuracy and consistency. Now, your templates are really going to play a big role in bringing that consistency on board. But the accuracy question is one that I feel like I see people run into a lot because it's so easy to mess up those formulas in Excel. I mean, Ian, how many times have you seen that with clients that you've worked with?
Oh, thousands. It's so easy to do, and it's such a simple little mistake. You just click into it and you want to round off a number, so you type in the number that you'd rather have as a rounded figure, and boom, formulas are all gone.
And that's it. And that, I mean, it's as simple as that. That's really all it takes to go from an estimate that's accurate or close enough to one that's really way off base. And often those are mistakes that you don't catch until a little bit later down the road, when you realize the numbers aren't really adding up, or what you're spending is really not in line with where you thought the budget was going to be, and you realize, oh gosh, there's been a mistake in this spreadsheet. I mean, it can be really catastrophic for a project to get to that point. So one of the things that's an advantage when you're looking at moving to a platform like Construction Online is really eliminating the possibility for those types of errors just simply doesn't exist. Now, I'll go ahead. One thing with Construction Online estimating, we have this great full screen tool. So we'll go ahead and pull up an estimate here and walk you through some of the things that Construction Online is going to calculate for you. I personally like the advanced estimating mode here. And as we look at our estimate, we have, of course, our categories and then our lines listed underneath. And right from the very beginning, some of the things that we have the ability to track, calculate, and report on are going to be evident. So when we're getting started, of course, you're going to enter your name and your descriptions for the items that you have listed here, but you're also going to be able to track additional information. You know, what's our classification here? Material, labor, equipment, and this is going to allow you to do some fantastic reporting off of your estimate later. But when you're looking at those calculations, you have, of course, your cost. Now, just like with an Excel sheet, it could be as easy as just entering in a lump sum number here. But we can also set this up so that we're using a quantity and unit cost, which is going to allow us to then calculate that base cost, again, with no additional work or formulas or anything like that necessary from you. Now, as we move across the sheet here, though, we'll start to get into some of the things that are definitely a little bit trickier, at least in my opinion, for people to calculate on their own. And that's when we're looking at handling those markups and margins for your project. So when we look at what you might have to try and build into an Excel sheet, could be things like, you know, profit margins and markup percentages, and those are things that Construction Online estimating is just going to do for you. So you'll notice that for each of these lines, we do have the ability to go ahead and apply an individual markup here. So if we wanted to add an additional 10%, we could do that. But one thing Construction Online does is give you some additional options here in terms of the types of markups that we might want to apply. So it could be a percentage base. It could be that we want to just do a lump sum. It could be that we want to do a dollar value per unit that we have in the system here. So a lot of those things that you might have to build formulas for in Excel and kind of set yourself up for the possibility of errors are simply going to be eliminated here in your Construction Online estimate.
Now this also starts to branch into some of my favorite parts of the Construction Online estimating system. There's three key elements here that most people don't think about, especially if they've come from something like Excel. The first one is, of course, this estimate is great for this project, but if we found something that works really, really well, we have a simple option to take this estimate and turn it into a template. Now, as we're saving these as a template, there's actually an option in here to go through and remove any project-specific information as we're saving it. Now, again, in Excel, this is normally something that you would have to do column by column or row by row, and it takes a little bit of time. For us, you check a couple of boxes and it's finished. Now, this actually leads to the second item as well, because Holly, as we're looking at this estimate is, so far, it's taking up most of the screen that we're looking at, and we're not even done with our first division. Now, if I recognize this one correctly, it looks like it's probably the CSI 16 division estimating template. Yeah, which means that we have 16 times more information than we're looking at right now on the screen. There's a lot of possible items that we might be working on, or things that I, as an estimator, would need to consider and dismiss as I'm moving through each of these sections to make sure that we don't miss anything. This estimate has an option to hide all of those. Again, unlike Excel, where you would have to go through and either delete them, or if we're copying the information over to let's say we've got some references over to an additional sheet for our proposal template, and I'm using air quotes as if you could see that, because it's really just a table in a different way in Excel. But if we wanted to do something like that, we could, but it'd still take a long time to go through and clean up the presentation to give to the customer. So the first two there's a really easy save as template option that clears away all the project specific stuff to give you a clean slate. There's some really easy options to clean up your view, look for everything that you need, add in the pertinent stuff, and then hide everything else. And then option number 3 is actually the reports that we have the ability to generate from. These are very, very professional proposals and material lists. A lot of people need a bill of materials of some form. All of those can be generated very easily, very cleanly, and most of them as PDFs as well, to make them much easier to read than your standard Excel spreadsheet. So again, as you're pulling through, these are the kind of reports that 20 years ago might have taken us hours and hours and hours to write. Now they take all of about 10 seconds because you're just going to go through and confirm any of the options in the report form, and there you go, it's done. So those are, as far as the online estimating, those are my 3 favorite aspects to it. Simply because each one of those is an often overlooked, humongous time sink in systems like Excel or other systems. Some of our competitors don't have some easy options for templating or anything like that either. And most people don't even think about that and will willingly invest hours that is completely unnecessary in doing these things. With us, no need.
That's right. Well, I think you want to look when you're deciding on, the right system, the right way to build and manage your estimates. You want to look at the creation of the estimate. So, things like templates, things like being able to hide information that you're not needing and really get in there and quickly create an estimate that is accurate and laid out the way that you want it is going to be the first step. And then when we look at reports, to me, I think that that's where you start to see some of those additional, being able to put together an estimate is really only the very first step in what will become many other things that you need to do with that data. So if it's somewhere like an Excel sheet, you're really not going to have the option to pull all of the financial reports. You won't have the option to integrate with other systems. You'll have the data stored, but what else will you be able to do with it? And I think that's what I really love about the reports here is that, not only do you have the ability to create a proposal, so you've got a couple of really great options, but if we wanted to use some of the other information that we've now entered or built into our estimate, we could do so to pull quickly a materials list based on things that we'd flagged as a material, or maybe generate a request for quote based on a certain category throughout the estimate or something like that. So there's so much more that you can now do with that data within just a couple of clicks. I mean, it really only takes 10 seconds or so to pull that type of information out. And that would really take hours kind of trying to do that manually through another method.
And just as a side note to this as well, most of the companies that I've had the opportunity to work with over the past several years, of course, with over 600,000 construction companies or construction clients that we work with in ConstructionOnline, I've seen a lot of different estimate styles and estimating templates. But one of the things that I also find relatively common here as well, we have a lot of people who will create individual worksheets for different styles of views that they're working on. So you might have one which is your estimating view, and then you might have another one which is your presentation, and then you've got another one which is your financials, your estimate versus actuals view. We have a drop down where we just reorganize the information that's accessible here. You can also customize these views just by right-clicking on a column header and hiding various different columns, or showing other ones that might be important for what you need to do. And everybody who's working within this, who has access to the estimate, can start to define their own views too. You're all looking at the same information, but you can see it the way you need to, which is hugely, hugely valuable. Again, in the past, the most common underlying thread for these estimate templates that people are bringing to me has been 10 sheets which are just different ways to present the same exact piece of information. We have 5 defined views, which is just a drop-down that you can select, but you can also create your own view at any point, and everybody has their own set. Now, this actually leads into one of our next pieces here as well. Huge disadvantage to some of the major estimating platforms, again, from years ago, and Excel-based systems and things like that. None of them talk to other programs well. And the one in particular that I always kind of fall back to is QuickBooks. I'm a QuickBooks Pro advisor, and honestly, UDA has been a QuickBooks Gold Certified developer for longer than I've been working with QuickBooks myself.
That's right, over 10 years.
Yeah, and as we've worked through that, we've given you tons of different flexibility options to go through and define how this information is going to go to QuickBooks, so that when it connects to your QuickBooks company file, it actually feeds into the systems that you guys want it to, instead of just picking things arbitrarily or defining it as you would. Now, where I find this is most valuable is you can take everything that we've put here, all the time that you've invested putting together these brilliant estimate templates. You can push the information over to QuickBooks and then just connect it in, most importantly, to your chart of accounts. This way your balance sheet and your P&L report will look exactly as it needs to, exactly as you and any of your investors or the owners of the company might like to read those forms. Those reports don't change. What we're doing is we're just expanding some of the capabilities that you can pull from those reports and eliminating all of the time spent entering those same pieces of information. Again, I know a lot of bookkeepers who are very comfortable spending the time putting that information in, but it only takes one or two missed line items to really hamper any given project. If you miss a couple of lines, suddenly that project might look like it's a few $1,000s over budget from a typo.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Just like with putting the estimates together, when you look at something like trying to get the information from the estimate or budget into an accounting system, you're really facing the same set of problems. You're facing speed and the amount of time that it takes to do that, and you're facing accuracy because, like you said, even if you've got someone that doesn't mind, or maybe that's really their responsibility is to type that information in, everyone's only human, so it's not unthinkable at all that mistakes happen. In fact, it's pretty likely that in the course of entering detailed estimating information, that mistakes will happen. It just, it's so easy for one little slip of the finger to end up with an inaccurate number. And that can really, kind of snowball and impact the rest of the project moving on there.
Yeah, I also find this one interesting as well, because as we start to get into the QuickBooks integration, busy bookkeepers, first of all, good bookkeepers are usually about $35 an hour, give or take. It starts to get a little bit more expensive depending on how much accounting activity they have. Now, if you have a bookkeeper on staff who does their job very well, what I like to see in those cases is free up those times where they're feeling kind of overburdened because they're trying to enter in all of this standard information. We can integrate, so we can do all the basic data entry for them, and that allows them to stop trying so hard to multitask and instead focus on the critical things, like getting your vendor invoices entered in and double checked properly, or making sure that all of the invoices that we've sent to our customer to collect payment are actually being reviewed and paid. These are some of the most important time resources or most important needs for the bookkeeper. If you can free them up from doing the really basic data entry stuff that ConstructionOnline does beautifully well, and you allow them to start doing the things that make you more money, well, guess what the end of the result's going to be? You're going to make more money.
More money, right? And that's definitely what we want. We're looking for a way to help our projects be more profitable, and this is just one of the ways that you can accomplish that. Now, one thing that I really love about the accounting integration, and it's a question I get asked frequently when I'm helping people get started, is like, okay, so we can integrate with QuickBooks, both QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, and that's great. We'll be able to send our estimate to our QuickBooks account. But what about what happens next? Is it a two-way integration? Will we be able to actually pull information back? And I think that's where ConstructionOnline really starts to shine, because not only have we been able to easily transfer that information to our accounting program, as the bookkeeper is doing his or her thing and making sure those invoices are being paid and that we're up to date, you run into the challenge of then how to communicate what's been done back to the project manager, back to the project team, so that you can get an accurate view of where do we stand? How much have we spent of our budget so far? Is it what we think it is? How much have we been paid by the client? Are they up to date? And so there's a little bit of a question mark as to, what's the best or most efficient way for the bookkeeper to then be able to communicate that information back to the project team. Now, often when I talk to people as they're getting started, they have some sort of manual method in place where the bookkeeper will go through and print up a report, maybe out of QuickBooks, that based on what they've done, hand that off to the project manager who's responsible for coming back and hand entering that into most likely an Excel sheet somewhere. Construction Online is also going to be able to eliminate all of those steps along the way by pulling information from QuickBooks back into your estimate, which is where we see some of the dashboards that we're looking at on my screen here. This is just going to populate the information into your actuals column, your committed column, or in the case of payments, your invoiced column. And then that allows us to see, well, what do we need to charge here? What have we been paid? What's the outstanding balance owed? Or same thing from a budget standpoint. What did we originally budget for? And how much of that budget have we used? You're able to get that, again, just with a few clicks.
Absolutely. And this is also one of the huge benefits that a system that Construction Online offers with the dashboard elements over your systems like Excel. Most people don't invest the time in Excel to put together graphs and any visuals really, unless it's on the sales side. And so what ends up happening is project managers will have to sit down and run the numbers themselves, even if you're just looking at the numbers. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that nobody spent hours, or that the project manager wasn't required to spend hours entering in all those manual costs, and that somehow the bookkeeper just automatically had the report configured in QuickBooks to do it for them. They're still going to have to go through and then calculate out percentages or just double check this information. They'll have to go through then and there's a lot of time spent just figuring out if that matches up or meshes up. What I love about this is it's the reporting tools and the dashboard elements that are always available. It is always right there at your fingertips. So at any point, a project manager or a site supervisor or a lead carpenter or a company owner or the owner of the home, if they're being given access to something like this too, they can just at a glance verify the information that they're looking at. You could pull this up from the job site too, and so if you're looking through this and you're trying to put together something like an application for payment, if you're looking at those percentages up top and you're trying to enter in those percentages for work complete, again, everything is just kind of laid out for you visually so that you can process that information instantly, instead of pulling out your calculator and your spreadsheets and your red pens and your... I like these things. Don't get me wrong, I like them. They're just not better.
They're not better, no. Well, they just create a lot of extra work, and I think that's the thing that we want to eliminate. Now, some other things that we would often look at or see at this point. So we, look at putting together an estimate. We look at what are we going to do with it immediately after. We're going to make proposals. We're going to create some reports. We're going to maybe integrate with our accounting system. As we're going along, we're going to pull that information back from QuickBooks. We're going to be able to do some job costing. There'll be additional reports, by the way, that you can now pull at this point. So once you've started recording those actuals, then you'll be able to come in and do things like your estimate versus actual report or an over budget report. So you've got some of those financial insights available to you here. Now, I know one thing that clients are also often needing a better way to manage at this point in the process is, what about those inevitable changes or change orders that are going to start to happen? Now, again, when we look at the advantages of using an integrated system like Construction Online, not only is the estimating platform outstanding and going to give you so many great tools that you can work with, but it's integrated with other financial management tools such as your change order management. That's going to allow you to create change orders, have those tie into the estimate to really be able to get an accurate understanding of how those changes are impacting the budget.
Yeah. Now, the change order question as well is a really, really important one, because of course when the change orders are coming together, with Construction Online you have the ability to build those change orders on a job site when you're having the discussion with the customer. Of course, if we don't have prices yet, we can always set that change order into kind of a pending state, where we just want to take that back to the office and make sure that first of all we write down the communication here under the description, but we save the rest of it until we can sit down and price out this change order. Now, what I love the most about this, again, going back to QuickBooks because I'm kind of biased, as we go through and we put together all this information in the change order itself, of course here in the change order you can put together, why are we doing these change orders? Where did this come from? Is it our fault? Is it somebody else's fault? Was it client request? all these things are going to be available here. But you actually have the option to configure how this change order will interact with QuickBooks when the time comes. And to do that, once Holly has finished putting this change order in, no rush, Holly. But as she finishes that up, there's an area in the accounting integration where you can actually select what happens when one of these change orders is approved, or when we want to watch that change order to see when it's getting paid. All of these different options are going to be available. And as you're going through and working with them, of course here we've got that draft versus pending approval. When the customer approves, you can now say, okay, ConstructionOnline, what do we need to happen when a customer approves this change order? And through the QuickBooks Integration tab, you can go to the change orders portion, and then from here you can say, as soon as they click yes, let's move forward, we can push all the information over and generate an estimate and an invoice in QuickBooks. Immediately. You don't even have to get the notification about that. When you do get the notification, all of your content's already in QuickBooks, so you're ready to go.
That's right. Financial management at this stage of the project is often including a really heavy dose of communication. That's something, again, common question that I get is how does everyone on the team know that this is happening? And of course, we have notifications in place that will let you know. But usually the reason for the question is, how can I communicate to my accountant that a change order has been approved, or the bookkeeper in this case? How can I communicate that that's been approved so that they know to go into QuickBooks and create an invoice? So what this is doing is really eliminating the need for that question. If you want that to be automatically done, then just by using these options, when the change order is approved, and you can differentiate between whether the client approves it or whether you as the builder come in and mark that as approved. In most cases, you're going to want to keep both of these selected, just so the system will handle as much for you as possible. So when the client marks that change order as approved, or when you go ahead and designate it as approved by the client, immediately ConstructionOnline will create that QuickBooks invoice and QuickBooks estimate right in your QuickBooks account without the bookkeeper having to do any extra work at that point.
That's right. And again, as this information is becoming available, don't forget, everything that we are looking at here is going to be available in the mobile app too. The change order feature exists there, so if a project manager wants to just go in and double check where we stand on any of those, they could open them up in the app. If you're working with the customer and you want to get the customer to approve on the spot, you can actually approve those change orders. And if you guys wanted to, you can have it set up so that it can request the client's signature at that time. So you can capture those signatures, at which point, depending on your settings here, that could actually trigger send the estimate over to QuickBooks, send the invoice over to QuickBooks, everything's organized and ready. And depending on how you set up QuickBooks Online, you can also have it set up so that it'll so that it will email that invoice to the client as soon as that's ready as well. So again, all these things which are going to be triggered and moving straight from one thing to the next just by having all of this information together and integrated into the ConstructionOnline platform or mobile app, so that everything is accessible at all times to the people who need it.
That's right. Just like with your estimate, as you're managing the change order part of this process, you have your dashboard. So again, taking that information, giving you some really insightful information so you can see quickly, where did we start, what's been approved in change orders so far, maybe what do we have currently pending, hanging out there from a change order standpoint that I need to be aware of, and a way to easily track what have we been paid for. So you can see in my account, I have 2 approved change orders, but the client hasn't actually paid me for either one of those. So we want to be able to really keep an eye on that sort of thing as well. Now, just like with change orders, you also have your client selections or allowances that you can manage. This also will tie in to your estimate. So these are going to add on to the overall total of that estimate as you're adding those allowances in. So again, what might have required multiple spreadsheets to track, kind of being able to track maybe the financial side of an allowance versus what the client has actually selected or chosen, is all going to be done in one place here, and is all going to interact with your estimate, really providing a complete solution on the financial side.
And of course, giving us the option to view it in the app.
Of course.
Yeah. And I always go back to that too, because I end up having the opportunity to travel a fair bit. I spend probably less time in the car than most of your project managers do, but even still, or in the truck or whatever it might be. But even with all of that, I constantly find the need to double check almost everything that I'm working on at any given point. If I've got access to that information in an app on my phone, it does that. It accomplishes that goal. The alternative, though, unfortunately, is a lot of the times I have to try to remember to bring paperwork with me, like paper reports or manila folders or legal pads. And if I don't have those, then I've got to call back to the office and get them to email me things. It's not the happiest moments when that comes up, because everybody in the office is usually busy too, and then I've got to wait for them, and then I've got to hope that they remember to send it out immediately, and it's more trouble than it's worth, especially since now with these tools available through Construction Online, we always have access to it through the app, and there's no excuse or there's no reason not to be able to pull that information up right away.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can pull it up immediately, always have the information that you need, and be able to have that at hand so that you can really work, of course, from anywhere.
Yeah,
no.
And along those lines too, I can see some of you that I've had the opportunity to work with in person. Maybe I've joined you in your office, or maybe you've come here to our office, or maybe we even met up at one of the builder shows, the International Builder Show, or we did one in Texas some time ago, or through our partnerships with like NARI or NAHB or Master Home Builders or Modelers Advantage, whoever it might be. You've probably been talking to me, and at some point I said, well, let's just check to see what resources we have available, or let me send you something so that you can take a look at it yourself. If it's on my phone, fantastic. Sometimes I've said, well, I'll send it to you as soon as I get back to the office. That's me being disappointed that I didn't have access to it, because then I have to remember and make notes of it and everything like that. So some of you guys have heard me firsthand struggle with those things. This is one of the primary reasons why we made the all-in-one app too, so that everything would be there and accessible, so you guys don't have that same pain that I did.
Yeah, that's right. Accessibility is definitely a big thing.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at other things that we might do next with this information, so as we look at everything that we've been able to do in terms of putting together our estimate, eliminating those mistakes, really working with the other parts of the system and even outside integrations as well. The last thing that I wanted to make sure that we touched on from a reporting standpoint is that, of course, it's great to be able to take this individual estimate and see so much great information here. You have all of that at your fingertips. A lot of great reports and dashboards are built here. But you also have in your company overview, again, something that Excel really can't do for you, and that's take the information from multiple estimates and combine them into reports and dashboards that you can then use to get some additional insight from a company perspective. This is probably my favorite one. If you head to your company overview and go into your financials tab, you have this great contract summary that really takes all of my active estimates, puts the information together in one dashboard so that I can immediately see that I am just over 5.1 million here in my estimated kind of total project value. I can see how much of that was my base estimate, how much of that we've added based on change orders, how much, perhaps most importantly, I have flagged as company overhead and margin, and be able to see that for all of my active jobs. Again, just with a click. I'm not having to go through spreadsheets, run calculations, trying to set up formulas to see if I can do that somehow through that as opposed to manually. It's all going to be done for me. So I've got this information that I can keep really a check on, at all times if I want to.
Absolutely. And then, of course, from here as well, we can shift over from the contract summary to a budget versus actuals to make sure that our spending is in line, which on Summit at Smith Square, it's absolutely not. Holly, what did you do there?
I have messed up here on this project, so it's great that we're able to see we've used 289% of our budget. That's not a good thing, so might want to track that a little bit earlier with some of these. So and
this, by the way, this also highlights one of the things. The most successful companies that I've ever worked with are going through and reviewing the budget versus actuals, usually no less than about once a month. Now, if we could do it for all jobs at once, that's great. What we might find is that if you go back to the budget versus actuals, that 289 is actually the one place that we've been putting all of our costs for all of the projects that we work in that subdivision. Maybe we just haven't been breaking up our actual costs properly. That might be a side effect. The alternative is I'm going to figure out who our super is on that project or who the project manager is on that job and probably have an interesting sit down with them to discuss. But again, if we're here, we can identify those problems immediately. It would never normally get to this point without us catching it well ahead of time. And this type of report gives us that tool or that utility. Then on the paid versus remaining side, the most painful discussions that I have with companies are chasing down that last payment on most of their jobs, or chasing down payments because they've been sent, the requests have been sent to their clients, but they are maybe afraid to ask for the money again, or something along those lines. What I love about this view is it makes it an eyesore, and sometimes it has to be an eyesore in order to actually force us to make that call, to make that phone call. Again, it might not be the most important thing to the customer at that time. They might not even be thinking about it as a major issue. So if we are constantly reminded using this kind of a tool or a dashboard, then again, it'll push us to be a better version of what we are right now, to make sure that we're getting everything done as we need to make sure that the company itself is successful.
Yeah, that's right. And often when you're looking at these bigger picture dashboards from a company perspective, you're really looking at a way to quickly identify, what might need my attention without having to sit down and go through every estimate and every project individually, once a week or every other day. We want a way that we can take a quick glance into what's going on and understand quickly if something is going to need our attention, or understand quickly maybe where we are in kind of the cycle for our project, for our company. In mine, I had $5 million worth of active projects and not much on the payment. So I could see that, okay, we'll be projecting this out based on the timeline of these projects, start tracking as those are coming in. Maybe that's helping me understand how aggressively I need to look at leads or kind of bids for new projects as we start to approach a different mix where we've been paid for most of what our active projects are doing. So it can give you a lot of information that just then will nudge you in the right direction as far as, well, where do I need to look next? Do I need to dive in and address maybe an issue with a project or a project manager? What do I need to be looking at from a company perspective? Now, of course, you've got your estimate dashboards here. The same thing is true, of course, for your change orders. We're going to combine all of those change orders across your projects and give you information on paid versus remaining, just like on the individual project level. We'll be showing that to you here in your company dashboard, as well as, overall added cost and time for your projects. So you'll be able to see that in one place as well.
Now, of course, with these dashboard elements, we are once again helping you focus on a lot of the information that you can. A lot of us, though, we also need to make sure that the people who are directly managing the jobs or directly impacted by these results, they need to be able to receive any of these early indicators as well. Now, I might not want to print off this whole page or try to get these dashboard elements into a single screen for them. Sometimes, and for some of you guys, I've also seen like big screens in the office where we can keep this information up on the screen. Holly, you've got 2 in your office where you've got dashboards up all the time. Super jealous about that, by the way. But for the rest of these, especially for the team members who are going to be on the move a lot, if we want to eliminate meetings, you can always go back into the financial report section and generate like a weekly estimate versus actual or a budget report and just email it directly once you run that report. So if at any point you need somebody to take a look at something, you can just come in here and run the estimate versus actuals report. Because it's generating in as a PDF on ConstructionOnline, you can also take it and edit that form as well. And for some of you, something that you guys might be doing currently in something like a Word document or an Excel file that you don't realize you can do here, you've got all of the editing capabilities with these reports that you're generating. So if you spot something that needs attention, highlight the row you can actually come in here and do things like type in some additional notes. Hey, we need to talk about this. Or from here with just the standard tools, maybe if we're going to be eliminating sections, you can highlight them as Holly's done, and there's a strike through tool up at the top. Just a really simple little option to mark these things off. If we're negotiating with a customer, you can do all of this kind of adjustments. Or you can go back into the full toolbar, which basically gives you all of like an on-point editing tool available online. And this is where you can go in and like fill in cells. So if you wanted to highlight a couple of cells or mark them, like paint the cell red or something like that, you've actually got the little fill tool here where you can choose a color and fill those things in. You can do all sorts of great things with these reports before you send them. These are some of the items that people like to hold on to Excel for because they're just familiar with how to do it, and they don't even realize that all of our reports give you the same capabilities, except of course that it pulls your attention to these items much more readily, and you can run them on demand. You can do these things whenever you want.
Again, it's a lot faster really than the Excel method. And now that I've made a couple of marks here, like you mentioned, Ian, from this point, I can save my changes, go ahead and share this out, email it to someone with a quick note. And like you said, maybe that's a meeting that we've eliminated, or information that we've been able to get to someone on our management team faster because we're not waiting for the time when we can pull out our spreadsheet, go through everything, write it all up. I mean, this can be done so quickly and easily.
Yeah. One of the other kind of more painful situations that I see happen from time to time is when the office starts to notice some issues that we need to get taken care of, phone calls are typically made. And when the phone call is made and you start talking to, again, a project manager or a site supervisor or somebody who's not in the office, over the phone you'll discuss a lot of really important elements, but then it's not followed up. There's no email, there's no writing or no documentation or anything like that. We assume because the phone call happened and we had a discussion and the other person agreed to take some action, we always assume that they're going to remember. And that has historically proven to be one of the biggest mistakes people make. In our case, if there's something that needs to be said, pull the report, look at the information, highlight what's important. You can still make the phone call. I'm a huge advocate for reaching out and talking to people directly, but providing this kind of documented reminder is critical. It eliminates all the miscommunications. In a lot of cases, like the most recent on-site training event that I got to go to, it also allowed their team to continue working at remote job sites around the city that they were in. It was a pretty big city. And they were able to get everything done without having to drive an hour back to the office every single time that they had to have one of these meetings. Nobody did. They were able to work almost completely remotely. They had a once-a-month meeting to go over all the projects. And everybody knew what they were going to talk about because all the reports were sent out a week in advance or a few days in advance. So literally everybody just shows up in the morning. They've all got their paperwork. If anybody has any comments or concerns or anything like that, everybody's already aware. Again, meeting is 15 minutes. I got to see one of these things in action. It was mind-boggling. Because again, I've seen these 2-hour meetings that covered less than these guys were able to get done in 15 minutes.
That's impressive. Yeah.
It was huge. And there was an interesting little point there where I started to wonder why they actually brought me there for training when all these things were going right. But we were actually still able to find a lot of value in that time. So it was fun, but man, to see some of these people using these kind of tools, still love to see it every time.
Yes. So I think that covers most of, Ian, what you and I wanted to talk about today. In terms of those advantages, of course, of using ConstructionOnline over any other system, but especially that old Excel spreadsheet. We'd like to take a moment just to pause, though. I know we've had a couple of questions coming in. We'll take a few minutes to answer those. And if you guys right now have any additional questions that you'd like to chat over or things that you'd like us to touch on or address before we wrap up today, go ahead and send those our way.
It looks like we do have a question here about some of the common reports that we should expect to use. As we've kind of talked about it before, my recommendation on the regular use of some of these reports, if we go take a look at financial reports, My expectation or my hope is that you and your team will be using, in the very least, the estimate versus actuals on a regular basis. Doesn't have to be every day, of course, but our practice was to make sure that actual costs were paid once a month, which also meant that we had to make sure that they were entered at least once a week. So my recommendation would be run the estimate versus actuals at the end of every week and send it off so that people can take a look over the weekend to make sure that there's nothing in there that needs to be addressed. And then for any material deliveries that are coming through, I highly recommend running material list in addition to the estimate itself, because for us, we always like to have some form of a checklist to kind of step through. This allowed us to verify from a job site everything that was going to be showing up on that delivery, so having some form of a material list like this is going to be important. Now granted, these can all be run at the beginning of the job, you don't have to wait, but it's still a fantastic resource that should always be available on every job.
Yeah, that's right. I think that, that estimate versus actual report and being able to run that, regularly is huge. Now, many of the other reports available, of course, are, they're fantastic reports, but they're not always ones that you have to run, on a regular weekly schedule. Sometimes they're, reports that are a little bit better used maybe at the end when you're looking at closing out a job. You may want to come in and run some of your change order summary reports that will allow you to break that down by type or reason so that you can, kind of look back on the project and see, okay, where did most of this come from? And of course, you would want to do some of your comparison or estimate versus actual, or maybe an over budget report at the end as well.
Looks like we have somebody who's using ConstructionSuite and ConstructionOnline. So one of the questions here is, what is the benefit of using ConstructionSuite over ConstructionOnline, or vice versa, I assume, in either direction? And there's a few. To a few advantages to each. ConstructionSuite, of course, is a desktop software. ConstructionOnline is a web-based software. As a desktop software, it is just inherently going to be a little bit more powerful. You're going to have more resources available to you, and you can do anything that the computer is capable of, as opposed to a web page, which has some limitations because it's got to be able to function on a phone, and therefore has to have the same kind of restrictions that it would have on the phone as on a desktop. So a lot of the reports that are available here on ConstructionOnline are streamlined to make sure that they can be generated quickly from like a phone or a tablet or something like that, whereas ConstructionSuite tends to have more detailed reports. The reports themselves are also a little bit more customizable because you've got the template that you can adjust if you guys needed to make any changes. Beyond that, though, content-wise, the two report sets are designed to be really, really similar because the people who are going to be running these reports are going to need them in a variety of different places. ConstructionOnline, we tended to focus on the reports that are going to need to be run by the people who are on the move. So you'll find that those reports are more prevalent here. There are some extras in ConstructionSuite because some of us who work in the office all the time might need a different style of report. So you've got more. I think ConstructionSuite has over 200 different contract and report templates now.
That's right.
What did you say last time? 250?
275, actually. Yes.
The number is huge. Obviously, we don't have quite that many choices to make here with ConstructionOnline, but again, the purposes for them are slightly different. And what you'll find is most of the reports on ConstructionOnline are designed for the people who need them on the move. With ConstructionSuite, they're designed for every imaginable situation, which is why we probably have 275. But again, you've got a variety of different tools. The other thing that you'll find is the reports on ConstructionOnline have the added advantage of generating immediately as a PDF, which means that you can send it out right away and you don't have to go through the couple of additional steps that you may in ConstructionSuite. So huge bonus there. It saves directly into your ConstructionOnline project, or you can email it as a PDF directly, which limits, of course, the client's ability to go into and change the contract amount on the form and then send it back signed saying, sure, $100,000 for this $500,000 home sounds great, let's do that. Which I've actually seen that happen a couple of times, which is always really interesting when it does. But again, with ConstructionOnline, you always have the added benefit of never having to worry about that particular concern.
Yeah, that's right. I think, often, like you said, there's just advantages and disadvantages to each. So we definitely try to work with people and their, unique kind of office and company setups to really look at, what's going to be the best solution or combination of solutions for the teams that we work with. We also have a great question about using Construction Online for owners in addition to general contractors. So I'm going to answer this question two ways because without being able to ask you guys some additional questions, I think that there's probably two different answers I would give. In the context of you are a general contractor and you have an owner or client of a building or home that you're working on, looking at ways of sharing that information. That's one of the other great use cases for those reports. Now, we don't make the live estimate available through the client or owner portal simply because it is an internal tool. It is just not intended for client consumption. So what you would want to do in those cases, and it's super easy to do, is generate some of those reports, whether that be a proposal in the beginning or maybe a project summary report as you're going along, to be able to give them regular status updates on the budget and where everything stands. When you generate those reports, you do have the option of saving those back into your files. So you can see the report that Ian and I made here can just go right back into the files. We can transfer it easily to our client portal or maybe stick it in a folder that's already shared in our portal. And then they would be able to log in via client link to access that information. So if we're looking at that type of owner GC relationship, that's really how I would recommend sharing your estimate or budget information. In addition to the things that they'll have available to them in terms of, approving change orders and signing off on that and seeing a quick recap of, where their budget stands overall. So a lot of great information available there. I have also worked on the other side of the question would be, what if I am an owner? What if I am an owner? Usually it's of larger commercial buildings or developments, and we have a division here that maybe needs to do some project management, but we also hire out GCs. And I've worked with teams using Construction Online quite successfully in that setup as well. So, the principles are still the same, being able to manage budgets and run reports. So it works really well in that type of scenario also.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we're starting to come close to time. So there's one last question that I kind of want to touch on in a few different ways. And then we'll wrap. But of course, if you guys do have any additional questions or anything else that you need to send our way, as always, you can reach out to us at our 800 number. Just give us a call at 1-800-700-8321. For those of you out of the country who would like to call in, you'll also have the ability to reach out to us at any of the additional contact points that we've got available from the website, so you can always reach out to us there as well. Also, by email, if you guys have any additional questions, you can send to us emails at info@uda1.com or support@uda1.com, unless of course you guys are interested in purchasing today, in which case sales at uda1.com.
That's
not
right.
sales at info.com. Sales at uda1.com. But this last question that I wanted to touch on before we let you guys go is it's one that we've kind of worked with in ConstructionSuite a fair bit, and we've got some interesting solutions for you on Construction Online as well. The question here, is there a way to fill in a % complete in estimates so that you can send a claim or a request for payment to the client? Some of you may be familiar with the term application for payment. It's one of the the Architectural Institute of America's standardized forms, G702 and G703 application for payment forms. You'll have those kind of do the % completion that the question seems to be referencing here. And a lot of those are available through ConstructionSuite for now, not Construction Online yet. And so those options are there. Some of you may also work between the ConstructionSuite estimate and schedule for syncing them up to get % completes and everything like that. One of the things, though, that I love about the QuickBooks integration here, the QuickBooks Online integration, it gives you an option to generate invoices based on different percentages for different line items. This will work in the accounting integration portion. So if you're looking at that when you're pushing your invoices, it's a really, really easy way to generate those. There's an additional option here, though, that most people don't even think about, which is at the top. There's a remaining total for all line items. So if you're working with an accounting integration and within the accounting integration tools, and you guys are generating your invoices like this, you can do separate invoice percentages on each area. You can also import invoiced amounts and then just invoice for everything that's left. This is one of the newer tool sets through QuickBooks Online integration especially that I really, really love, because this replaces some of the QuickBooks Desktop progress invoicing tool, and it makes it available online and readily accessible at all times. I love this option because, again, it allows us to just click an option and then confirm an invoice that collects all the remaining money on this job, and so we don't have to go through and add it all up by hand or anything like that anymore. So I really, really love this, and I hope you guys take advantage of it, because it is a game changer. It's huge, and it's one of the last few remaining things that held some of us to QuickBooks Desktop, and now it doesn't have to. Now, if you guys are moving to Construction Online, QuickBooks Online is currently an equal contender with QuickBooks Desktop, and hopefully you guys can go and take another look. We've replaced all of the deficiencies that they used to have without job costing tools or the progress invoicing tools and everything like that. We've really, really made this into a package of really powerful management tools here too. So great question, and thanks for leading into that, because I really, really like it. You also have to pick an invoice if you're going to send something.
Oh.
Now, of course, this, as I mentioned, this is going to wrap us today because we are at that 4 o'clock hour. So we have run out of time for the webinar today. Please, though, don't forget to join us as we dive into our next in the series of Construction Online, UDA Lunch and Learns.
That's right.
That's what we're doing next Wednesday, the 31st.
Wednesday the 31st. And we'll be covering next week on Wednesday at lunchtime. We'll be wrapping up our ConstructionSuite Lunch and Learn session, covering one of Ian's favorite topics and features, creating repeatable success using the workflows tool in ConstructionSuite.
Yeah, it is absolutely my favorite tool, especially as one of the longtime trainers here at UDA Technologies. The question comes up constantly. So what's my next step? What do I do next? In fact, even with some of these partnerships that we've gone to, builders are always asking that question of any expert that they find. What should my process look like? And with workflows, not only are you able to see what some of the industry leading experts recommend in that the workflow process, but you can also adjust those so that you can help all of your younger team members or employees follow your perfect process too. And that way, none of you will ever be lost and confused when it comes to finishing out one of these projects. Project workflows are just a tremendous asset in the ConstructionSuite software. So join us for that one next week. I'm super excited to talk about it, as you could tell, I'm sure.
It'll be a fantastic session, so I hope you guys can make it. For today, we want to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Good to see all of you here today, and we'll hope to see you at the next one. Until next time, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thanks so much for joining.
Take care, everyone.